one of the biggest stars of the 1970s and 1980s. With his charming smile, rugged looks, and unforgettable roles in hit TV shows like Gunsmoke and Hawk, he made audiences laugh, cry, and fall in love. He wasn't just a star, he was a legend, a man who lit up every screen he appeared on. But in 2018, the world said goodbye to Burt Reynolds. His passing left fans heartbroken, and since then, many have held on to the memories he left behind. Recently, his mansion, once a place filled with laughter, parties, and Hollywood magic, was open to the public. What was found inside brought tears to the eyes of onlookers and longtime fans alike. So, what was it that moved everyone so deeply? Join us as we take a closer look at the emotional discoveries inside Burt Reynolds' home, from humble beginnings to the big screen. When Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was released in 2019, it took the world by storm. With a star-studded cast featuring Brad Pitt, Margot Robbie, and Leonardo DiCaprio, fans couldn't get enough of it. What many don't know is that Burt Reynolds was originally meant to be part of the film. He had even started rehearsing his lines, but just days before filming, he passed away from a heart attack. He never got to bring that final role to life. While he lost his life, one thing is certain. Burt Reynolds lived with style and grace, and he brought every character he played to life with unmatched charisma. Born Burton Leon Reynolds Jr. on February 11, 1936, he came from a family with deep roots, Dutch, English, Scots-Irish, and Scottish. He also claimed Cherokee and Italian ancestry. Though he often said he was born in Waycross, Georgia, he later revealed in his autobiography that his real birthplace was Lansing, Michigan, where his family lived when his father was drafted into the Army. The family moved frequently, following his father's military assignments. Eventually, they settled in Riviera Beach, Florida. It was there that Burt, known as Buddy to locals, began to stand out, not on stage, but on the football field. By 10th grade, he was already earning all-state honors as a fullback, catching the attention of colleges across the country. He accepted a football scholarship to Florida State University and shared a dorm with future coach and sports analyst Lee Corso. It looked like football would be his future, but fate had other plans. A serious knee injury in his sophomore year, followed by a near-fatal car crash, changed everything. He lost his spleen and hurt his other knee. His dreams of a football career were over, but sometimes when one door closes, another opens. Back home and recovering, Burt enrolled at Palm Beach Junior College. There, he took an English class taught by a man who would change his life, Watson B. Duncan III. After hearing Burt read Shakespeare aloud in class, Duncan urged him to audition for a school play. That single moment led to Burt landing the lead role in Outward Bound, and he nailed it. His performance won him the 1956 Florida State Drama Award. That moment sparked a fire in him. In his autobiography, Burt called Duncan the most influential person in his life, a mentor who saw something in him before anyone else did. From football fields to film sets, Burt Reynolds' journey was anything but ordinary. He wasn't just an actor. He was a fighter, a dreamer, and a man who made the world fall in love with him again and again. Burt Reynolds' career, after winning a scholarship to the Hyde Park Playhouse, a summer theater in New York. Burt Reynolds thought of it as a fun way to avoid sweaty, back-breaking summer jobs. Acting wasn't a serious career goal, at least not yet, but things changed quickly. While working at the Playhouse, he met a young Joanne Woodward. She wasn't just an up-and-coming actress, she had a sharp eye for talent. "I don't think I ever actually saw him perform," she once said, "but he had this shy charm, and something about him made you want to help him." And she did. She introduced him to an agent, giving him his first big push. That push led him to a role in Tea and Sympathy at the Neighborhood Playhouse in New York City. Then came his Broadway debut in Look, We've Come Through. Critics liked him. The show hit the road for a tour, and guess who drove the bus? Reynolds himself. He was as humble as he was hungry. Back in New York, he dove into acting classes with future legends like Frank Gifford, Red Buttons, Carol Lawrence, and Jan Murray. But it wasn't always smooth sailing. After one terrible improvisation scene, Burt considered packing up and heading back to Florida. But fate wasn't done with him yet. Soon after, he landed a part in a revival of Mr. Roberts, starring Charlton Heston. And when the play ended, director John Forsythe helped arrange a movie audition for him. The film, Sayonara. The twist, Burt was told he looked too much like Marlon Brando, and so the part slipped through his fingers. Hollywood, however, kept calling. Studio talent agents saw how Burt made hearts flutter, especially in their office. Secretaries couldn't stop talking about him. Still, an early screen test didn't go well. So Reynolds hustled. He washed dishes, waited tables, drove delivery trucks, and even worked as a bouncer at Roseland Ballroom. At one point, he was paid $150 just to dive through a glass window for a live TV stunt. Then came his first big break. He landed a role on the TV series Riverboat, playing Ben Fraser, the pilot. The star of the show, Darren McCavan, led the way, but tension brewed behind the scenes. Reynolds clashed with both McCavan and the show's producer. After 20 episodes, he walked away. And just like that, the phone stopped ringing. "I couldn't get a job," Reynolds admitted. "You just don't walk out on a network series and expect the red carpet." So he went back to small parts, often the villain or the heavy. He guest starred in just about every show you can name. Playhouse 90, Alfred Hitchcock Presents Johnny Ringo, Zane Grey Theater, and more. They were depressing years, he later confessed, but in 1962, everything changed again. Dennis Weaver was leaving Gunsmoke, one of the top-rated shows in America. Producers created a new role, Quint Asper, a half-Native American blacksmith. Over 300 actors auditioned. Burt got the part. "I'll stay on this show until it ends," he declared. Leaving in the middle of a good thing is a big mistake. Yet in 1965, Reynolds did just that. He left. Why? Because he felt he'd outgrown the part. "I'd done my time," he said. "There wasn't room for two leading men." Next up, he scored the lead role in Hawk, 1966-67, playing a Native American detective named John Hawk. It had promise, but the show only lasted 17 episodes before being canceled. That didn't stop him. He went on to star in Navajo Joe, a spaghetti western shot in Spain. He played, yes, another Native American. Burt didn't hold back about it later. "It wasn't my favorite picture. Honestly, I had two expressions, mad and madder." But even through the flops and frustrations, Burt Reynolds kept pushing. Because deep down, he knew his moment was coming. And when it finally did, the world wouldn't just watch. It would fall in love. While Burt Reynolds was making a name for himself, there was one actor who just didn't like him. The Godfather and Marlon Brando feud. Marlon Brando threatened to quit The Godfather if Burt Reynolds was cast. Why? Well, the reason will actually shock you. So keep watching to find out. For all his awards and acclaim, Marlon Brando was notoriously difficult to work with. A legend? Yes. But also the kind of actor who'd tape cue cards to the set, or even to other actors, because he refused to memorize lines. He made outrageous demands in his contracts. And by the time the 1970s rolled around, many studio execs wanted nothing to do with him. So maybe it's less surprising to hear that Brando had an issue with another of Hollywood's biggest stars, Burt Reynolds. But the depth of his dislike, that's where things get interesting. The feud, while largely one-sided, was intense enough for Brando to issue a full-blown ultimatum. It's him or me. So what exactly did Reynolds do to get under Brando's skin? First, some quick background. Burt Reynolds was everywhere in the 1970s, box office gold. But he had a knack for turning down iconic roles. He passed on playing James Bond, Han Solo, and even the male lead in Pretty Woman. Shocking, right? But none of those missed chances compared to the role of Michael Corleone in The Godfather. Because that wasn't a role he turned down. It was a role ripped away from him. Director Francis Ford Coppola had a vision, and in that vision, Burt Reynolds was Michael Corleone. He believed Reynolds could perfectly capture Michael's early innocence and later ruthlessness. It would have been a defining career moment for Burt until Marlon Brando stepped in and shut it all down. Brando was furious. The idea of Reynolds playing his on-screen son? Unthinkable. He flat out refused to work with him. Word has it, he even threatened to walk off the film if Reynolds was cast. The studio caved. Coppola kept searching, and eventually, a relatively unknown actor named Al Pacino stepped into the role, cementing film history. But why was Brando so offended? Why that reaction? To understand, we have to rewind a bit further. Reynolds began building his reputation in the late 50s through television. One thing people couldn't stop talking about is striking resemblance to a young Marlon Brando. That might sound flattering, but not when the man you look like is famously temperamental and aging. By the 1960s, Brando's chiseled look had faded. So imagine his reaction when a young, dashing Burt Reynolds appeared on The Twilight Zone in a 1963 episode titled The Bard. In it, Reynolds played an arrogant young method actor, a parody of Brando himself, complete with exaggerated mumbling and posturing. The character was basically a walking Brando impersonation, and Brando took it personally. Very personal. From that moment, Brando saw Reynolds not as a peer, but as a threat, and maybe even an insult. He believed Reynolds had mocked him on national television, and if Brando had a gift, it was holding a grudge. For his part, Reynolds didn't exactly embrace the comparisons either. He eventually grew his signature mustache in the 70s, just to set himself apart from Brando's legacy. As for the whole Godfather situation, Reynolds brushed it off. That same year he starred in Deliverance, a raw, riveting performance that helped shape his own legend. Still, imagine what might have been a world where Burt Reynolds sat across from Brando as Michael and Vito Corleone. It could have changed everything. And if you think this was the only time Brando blocked Reynolds, think again. This wasn't a one-time feud. It was a Hollywood Cold War. Other roles. Marlon Brando prevented Barry Russell from getting. A few years after nearly handing Burt Reynolds the role of a lifetime in The Godfather, Francis Ford Coppola found himself circling back to the same actor for another monumental film, Apocalypse Now. But there was just one small problem. Marlon Brando was already cast. And if you thought their past tension was buried, think again. Brando wasn't just not thrilled at the idea of Reynolds joining the project. No, he was livid. In fact, an actual audio recording exists of the moment Brando discovered Reynolds might be involved. And let's just say the Oscar-winning actor wasn't subtle. His reaction. "He's the epitome of something that makes me want to throw up," Brando spat. And if that wasn't enough, he delivered another jab straight from his ego. He worships at the temple of his own narcissism. Bold words, especially coming from a man who showed up to the Apocalypse Now, set over 300 pounds with zero knowledge of his lines, and no clue what the film was about. That's right, Brando hadn't even read Heart of Darkness, the novel that inspired the movie. Add to that his refusal to work with Dennis Hopper, his erratic behavior, and a general sense of chaos. And suddenly Brando's accusations of narcissism start to feel a little ironic. But Brando wasn't done. He launched into a bizarre anecdote about Reynolds that seemed to haunt him. He recalled watching a TV appearance where Burt tried to appear affectionate toward a young child. According to Brando, the kid was maybe 3 or 4. He wanted to show how loving he was, so he stooped down, playing for the cameras. "Oh, how I love children." But when the child began to wander off, he pulled the kid back, trying to stage a picture-perfect scene. The whole idea of hustling children. The kid wouldn't do the bulls, though it was the kind of rant that said far more about Brando's worldview than Burt's. But just like he did after The Godfather, Reynolds bounced back. While Brando chewed scenery and reportedly actual food in Apocalypse Now, Reynolds rolled into the spotlight with Smokey and the Bandit. Released the same weekend as Star Wars, it became a runaway hit and cemented Reynolds as a comedy legend. Not a Dramatic also ran. And with that, the feud mostly fizzled, publicly at least, but Burt wasn't entirely silent. In 1980, he hosted Saturday Night Live for the first and only time, and he made sure to settle the score in the best way he knew, with a laugh. In a parody sketch, Gilda Radner played Baba Wawa, a spoof of Barbara Walters, while Burt played a fictional version of Marlon Brando, bedridden, mumbling, and stuffing his face with food mid-interview. It was pure, unfiltered mockery, and it landed. Still, despite the history, Burt chose not to drag Brando in interviews. And to be fair, Brando never publicly trashed Reynolds either. His scathing comments were recorded on set and released without his consent. But that didn't mean Burt didn't know. When asked by Andy Cohen in 2019 if the long-standing feud ever bothered him, Reynolds had the last laugh. His response? "No, I was very flattered. I was flattered he was upset." It was the kind of classy, cool-headed reply that would have driven Brando insane, precisely because it denied him the satisfaction of a true war of words. And that, perhaps, is the most poetic ending to one of Hollywood's quietest, pettiest, and most fascinating feuds. Though Reynolds had the last laugh with Marlon Reynolds, same didn't happen in his marriages. Burt Reynolds' costly divorce. Burt Reynolds and Lonnie Anderson's marriage is undoubtedly one for the Hollywood history books, and not for the reasons fairy tales are made of. Over the years, Reynolds was brutally honest about his regrets, calling his 1988 decision to marry Anderson a really dumb move on my part. He said he should have known not to marry an actress. The actor who passed away at Jupiter Medical in Florida on September 6, 2018, at the age of 82, didn't hold back in later years when reflecting on the rocky road that was their marriage. In his 2015 memoir, But Enough About Me, Reynolds painted a portrait of extravagance and incompatibility. Anderson's spending habits became so legendary that Reynolds shared this eyebrow-raising anecdote. "I gave her a Platinum American Express card with a $45,000 credit limit. She maxed it out in half an hour, but it wasn't always bitter and biting." Reynolds and Anderson first met in 1981 and began dating the following year. They quickly became one of Hollywood's it couples, appearing arm in arm on red carpets and splashed across magazine covers. In June 1982, Reynolds told People whether this relationship will go any further than it has right now, "I have no idea. Lonnie and I are both trying very hard to get acquainted and to like each other without too many explosions and broadsides from the press." By 1988, they decided to take the plunge. Secretly, the pair tied the knot in a top-secret ceremony at Reynolds's private ranch in Jupiter, Florida. The moment was documented by People, and at the reception following the intimate 20-minute ceremony, the star gushed and said that he was a very happy man. Anderson, on the other hand, said that she felt like Cinderella getting married to her Prince Charming. At this time, things were still going well. The two later adopted their son, Quentin Reynolds, and for a moment it looked like they had it all. But by June 1993, the dream began to unravel. Reynolds publicly announced their split, blindsiding many. His rep issued a statement declaring the marriage irretrievably broken, while clarifying that although Reynolds had the highest respect and regard for Miss Anderson, he feels his priorities and hers have become different. But the phrasing didn't match what was happening behind the scenes. Reynolds later told Good Morning America, Evening Edition, that one major wedge was the absence of intimacy. Adding another layer to the already dramatic unraveling, Reynolds admitted he had become involved with another woman, but claimed it was only after catching Anderson in an affair of her own. Reynolds called Anderson an underemployed actress who suffered from low self-esteem and, in his view, was not a good mother. Meanwhile, Anderson refused to sling mud in the press, responding with just 2 sentences. "I do not intend to engage in a media war. I have to consider the welfare and best interests of my little boy." The bitterness, however, boiled over. Reynolds' personal photographer and longtime friend Lisa Smith even took a swipe at Anderson's homemaking skills, claiming she only cooked 9 or 11 times. The gloves were officially off. Anderson stayed relatively quiet until 1995, when she broke her silence in an interview with SF Gate, accusing Reynolds of physically abusing her at least a dozen times, allegedly while under the influence of drugs. She also claimed that he often failed to pay the $15,000 in monthly child support. Years of legal battles followed, with the divorce dragging on longer than the marriage itself. It wasn't until 2015, over 2 decades later, that Reynolds finally cut a $154,520 check, officially closing that painful chapter. According to TMZ, despite all the bitterness, there was a moment of grace after Reynolds' death. Anderson issued a statement to Fox News, saying she was incredibly touched by the outpouring of love and support from her family and friends throughout the world. She called Burt a wonderful director and actor. And while Reynolds never remarried, there was one woman he always came back to emotionally. One love he never stopped missing, Sally Field, the woman who stole Burt Reynolds' heart. Of all the women in Burt Reynolds' life, there was one in particular whom he just couldn't get over. The young actress was the one who slipped through the fingers of Hollywood's most dashing leading man, and he never quite got over it. In 2015, Burt Reynolds sparked a wave of renewed fascination when he told Vanity Fair that Sally Field had been the love of his life. It had been decades since their whirlwind romance in the late 1970s. But that raw admission cracked open a love story the world had thought it knew and revealed and still simmering beneath the surface of fame and regret. Sally remained silent at the time, but when Burt died on September 6, 2018, at age 82, she finally shared her truth. In her memoir, In Pieces, released just 12 days after his passing, the Oscar-winning actress described a relationship far more complicated and painful than the public ever imagined. The pair had met in 1977 on the set of Smokey and the Bandit, where their on-screen chemistry mirrored what was happening behind the scenes. They fell fast and hard, and for nearly 5 years, they were Hollywood's golden couple. But behind the scenes, their love story was unraveling. Sally wrote that by the time they met, Burt's fame had already become a force that allowed him to control everyone around him, and that control extended to her. She felt she walked straight into his world only to be consumed by it. She described their bond as a perfect match of flaws, where she unknowingly stepped into a role she had been emotionally conditioned to play. She admitted that the connection was immediate and intense. Just days into filming Smokey and the Bandit, she already felt entangled with him. She believed they had become emotionally inseparable in a matter of days, and that the intensity of those early moments made time blur. She explained that there was more than just love at play. There was a deeper dynamic of her taking care of him and him needing that care more than he ever admitted. Sally also revealed that Burt made her feel desired in ways she had never known. He gave her a sense of being sexy and wanted, and she had wanted nothing more than to be everything he dreamed of. But that desire to please him came at a steep, personal cost. Over time, she said, she lost herself in him. She dressed for him, moved for him, lived for him, and stopped existing as her own person. Though Burt proposed to her several times, she always said no, believing he never truly meant it in his heart. She confessed that, had they married, it would have only deepened their pain. Despite the passion, the love, and the closeness, she knew their story was doomed. In Burt's later years, the regret seemed to hang over him like a storm cloud. He told Vanity Fair he missed her terribly and that he didn't understand why he had been so foolish. He admitted he had found the perfect woman and then did everything to mess it up. He told the Daily Mail that the loss of Sally never left him. He reflected on the 5 years and 4 films they had shared, calling her the love of his life and confessing that he had ruined it all. He said he had recently spoken with her son, who told him that Sally still talked about him often. Burt admitted he wished she would pick up the phone and call him, because more than anything, he wanted to have that final conversation. After his death, Sally told the New York Times that she was overwhelmed by memories of him, but she also admitted she was relieved that he wouldn't be around to read her memoir. She believed it would have hurt him and said she was grateful he wouldn't have to defend himself or lash out as he might have done. Her words weren't meant to wound him, but to finally set herself free. It was a love that burned hot, ran deep, and left scars. And in the end, it became the heartbreak both of them carried, quietly, separately, for the rest of their lives. What was found in Burt Reynolds' mansion? Burt Reynolds, one of the biggest action stars of the 1970s, known for films like The Longest Yard and Smokey and the Bandit, had a lesser-known passion: his love for a particular house. That passion began during the filming of Deliverance in 1972, when he fell head over heels not for a person, but for a 4-bedroom, 5-bathroom home nestled among the trees in Highlands, North Carolina. Now, that very house was put on the market for $2.95 million. The listing, held by Jody Lovell of Highlands Sotheby's International Realty, describes the property as a rare masterpiece combining architectural brilliance with natural beauty. It was designed by renowned architect Jim Fox, whose work draws inspiration from Frank Lloyd Wright's organic architecture principles, creating a home that blends perfectly with its surroundings. The story behind Reynolds' deep connection to this home is part of its charm. According to the listing, Burt and his then-wife, Lonnie Anderson, owned the property. During his time filming in nearby Rabun County, Reynolds fell in love with the area and the house itself. He purchased it and made improvements, clearly treasured the place. In a letter from December 1983, Reynolds wrote about his affection for the home, stating that although he owned about 14 houses, whenever people asked him which one was his favorite, he would instantly say his mountain house. This revealed just how special the property was to him. The house has attracted attention beyond the usual real estate circles. It was featured on Zillow Gone Wild, a popular social media page known for showcasing unique homes for sale. People were fascinated by the house's design and Reynolds' surprising admission about owning so many properties. One commenter joked about Burt not even knowing the exact number of houses he owned, while another recalled living nearby and spotting his helicopter on walks. Many admired the home's style, with one saying they wouldn't change a thing about it. Another person expressed amazement at Reynolds' taste in homes, calling it the nicest they had seen on the site. Some found the idea of owning 14 houses excessive, while others joked about buying the home along with an old Pontiac Trans Am, referencing Burt's iconic role in Smokey and the Bandit. This house isn't just real estate, it's a piece of Burt Reynolds' legacy, a mountain retreat that captured the heart of a Hollywood legend. Were you a fan of Burt Reynolds and his movies? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the following video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.